The day started quietly in Canton, Massachusetts, but the weather was already sending a warning. A blizzard was rolling in, heavy snow expected to bury the town by nightfall. Most people were preparing to hunker down, cancel plans, and stay inside, but not Sandra Birchmore. At 23, Sandra had a routine that was simple, yet full of small, meaningful tasks. That afternoon, she was seen on security cameras leaving her apartment to clear snow off her car. She moved with purpose, bundled up against the biting cold, her breath puffing in the winter air. There was a sense of normalcy in her actions, mundane, even. But for those who knew her, it was these little glimpses of her life that made her sudden death so shocking. Earlier that day, she had received a DoorDash delivery. Cameras captured her stepping into the lobby to pick it up, chatting briefly on her phone, probably coordinating dinner or simply keeping someone in her world updated. By all appearances, it was just a regular winter afternoon. But beneath the surface, Sandra's mind was occupied with plans far beyond snow and takeout. Her life was about to change in ways she could never imagine. At 23, she was 3 months pregnant, and for the first time in a long time, she was genuinely excited. Around her apartment lay the beginnings of preparations for her child. Newborn clothes, a brand new stroller, packages she hadn't even opened yet. Glitter-strewn ultrasound photos and tiny onesies hinted at the future she was dreaming of, a life that was just beginning to take shape. Despite the harsh winter weather, Sandra was moving forward, focused on her own plans. She had an OB/GYN appointment scheduled for February 10th, had arranged for a photographer to take newborn photos, and was coordinating a gender reveal. She even researched baby brands online, making lists, imagining her baby in each outfit, picturing each moment she would share with her child. It was a life full of ordinary joys, little responsibilities, and immense hope. And yet, the security footage that day would become chilling. That afternoon and early evening, Sandra went about her errands, collecting her delivery, brushing snow off her car, returning to her apartment. Each small step recorded by cameras would later be dissected by investigators, the last mundane traces of a life about to be stolen. By 5:33 p.m, she was seen returning to her apartment for the final time. No one outside her home would see her alive again. The snow fell steadily that evening, covering the sidewalks, blanketing the town in white, and inadvertently shielding the apartment that would soon become a crime scene. The storm made it unlikely anyone would check on her for at least a day, giving whoever was involved the cover they needed. What seemed like a regular winter evening was about to turn into a night that would shock the community, forever linking a blizzard, a young expectant mother, and a web of betrayal in a story that no one would forget. Sandra Birchmore's connection to law enforcement wasn't just a casual interest. It was the foundation of much of her life. At just 12 years old, she had applied to join the Stoughton Police Explorers program, a kind of junior police academy designed for teens interested in law enforcement. For many kids, it was a structured after-school activity, but for Sandra, it became a lifeline. Losing her mother at a young age had left a void in her life, and shortly after, she also lost her grandmother. With her father absent and no consistent male figure to guide her, she looked to the police officers she admired. They became her role models, the steady, authoritative presence she desperately needed. By the time she aged out of the program in 2016, Sandra had spent 6 formative years immersed in the world of uniforms, badges, and codes of conduct. She had befriended officers across Norfolk County, from rookies to seasoned detectives, and her admiration for them was no secret. Friends and family later said that Sandra idolized men in positions of authority. Her interest wasn't just fascination, it was deeply personal. She wanted people she could trust, people who could protect her in ways her own family hadn't been able to. Those years also shaped her personality. While Sandra could be bright and ambitious, she also had quirks that sometimes made social interactions awkward. She tended to overshare, talking freely about personal matters even with casual acquaintances. Co-workers later said that her chatty nature sometimes crossed boundaries, but it was part of who she was. A person with few filters, someone who wore her heart on her sleeve. By late 2020, Sandra had moved into her own apartment in Canton, stepping into newfound independence. She had lived with her aunt in Stoughton for years. and while she cherished her family, she wanted a space of her own. Friends described her as talkative, sometimes childlike, but driven in her own way. She had begun taking classes in preparation for nursing school and was simultaneously preparing for the arrival of her first child. Sandra's life was busy, layered, and full of both promise and vulnerability. This connection to law enforcement, while formative, would later become a source of manipulation. The men she admired most, the ones who had once served as her mentors, would use that trust to control her, blur boundaries, and ultimately contribute to her tragic death. It was a cruel irony that the world she'd looked to for guidance would become the stage for betrayal. By the evening of February 1st, 2021, Sandra was still caught between these two worlds, a young woman excited about motherhood, yet entangled in complicated relationships with men she had once respected. Little did she know, her trust would be exploited in ways that no young person should ever endure. On February 4th, 2021, a welfare check at Sandra Birchmore's Canton apartment revealed her lifeless body in the bedroom, a strap around her neck attached to the closet door. At first glance, it looked like suicide. Her apartment cluttered but orderly, nothing knocked over, no obvious signs of a struggle. But family members noticed troubling details. A cherished gold necklace broken and hanging from her neck, wet clothes in the washer, and unopened packages for her unborn child, a baby stroller and newborn onesies she had been excitedly planning for. Investigators soon focused on Matthew Farwell, a 38-year-old Stoughton police detective, and the man Sandra claimed was the father of her child. Their connection went back years to when she was just 14 in the Police Explorers program, and while Matthew admitted to a relationship in her early 20s, friends, family, and hundreds of text messages painted a disturbing picture of manipulation and abuse. When Sandra revealed her pregnancy, his behavior turned controlling and violent, escalating to physical intimidation and invasions of her privacy. On the night she died, a blizzard raged outside. Surveillance cameras showed her returning from her car at 5:33 p.m, and later Matthew entering the building at 9:14 p.m, dressed in a hoodie and mask, leaving at 9:43 p.m, minutes after Sandra's phone recorded her final movements. Evidence suggested he strategically chose the timing, knowing the storm and his wife being in labour would delay discovery, and he staged the scene to look like suicide, counting on colleagues to overlook suspicious details. Internal Affairs later revealed a broader pattern of abuse. Matthew, his twin William, and former Deputy Chief Robert Dine had groomed and exploited Sandra for years, taking advantage of her admiration for police officers and her trust, escalating from subtle manipulation to aggression once she became pregnant. The initial state medical examiner ruling of suicide was later overturned by forensic experts, who found clear signs of strangulation and struggle, leading to Matthew's federal arrest in August 2024 for killing a witness or victim, with the FBI stepping in to bypass the local system rife with corruption. Meanwhile, Sandra's family pursued a civil wrongful death lawsuit to hold accountable those who failed to protect her. Her story exposed the dark consequences of misplaced trust, manipulation by authority figures, and systemic failures in law enforcement programs. Full of plans, hopes, and the excitement of impending motherhood, Sandra's life was cut tragically short, but her name and story continue to remind the community of the dangers when those sworn to protect instead betray the vulnerable.